It wasn't said on camera. It wasn't tweeted. It was whispered, quietly, behind closed doors. But the message rang louder than any headline. The world caught wind when a joke leaked. A joke that Meghan Markle wasn't invited to that private getaway. Not just any trip, the one with Serena, with Emma, the one that flooded Instagram like a Vogue spread for the ultra-elite. And when Meghan reached out, unsure, still trying, she was met with silence. Not even a polite decline. No response. That silence said everything. Because this wasn't about one weekend. This was about years of quiet distance, of subtle digs, of a slow, icy drift between women who once called each other sisters. And now, the Duchess wasn't just left out, she was left behind. A betrayal in plain sight, a reputation. Carefully built, slowly crumbling under the weight of whispers. The story behind the snub is darker than anyone imagined, and it's time to tell it. Once upon a time, not in a fairy tale, but in front of millions of cameras, Meghan Markle and Serena Williams were inseparable. Two women at the peak of their power. One, a global sports icon. The other, the woman who had just married into royalty. They praised each other publicly, lifted one another up in interviews, and stood by each other during key moments. Serena was front and center at Meghan's royal wedding in 2018. Radiant, regal, respected. And Meghan returned the favor, supporting Serena at Wimbledon, cheering courtside with adoring eyes. They weren't just friends. They were symbols of empowerment, resilience, and solidarity between women of color navigating elite, often unforgiving spaces. Serena's image has always been carefully balanced. Powerful yet private, graceful without fanfare. Even at her most trailblazing, she rarely stirs drama. That's what made her so beloved. Not just for her victories, but for her discretion. And then, quietly, Emma Thynn entered the frame. A Marchioness, British nobility, biracial, elegant, poised. To many, Emma represented the path Meghan could have taken. Accepted by the aristocracy, embraced by high society, applauded for her dignity and calm. She didn't step into the spotlight loudly. She was simply there at the table. On the guest list, in the photographs. And Meghan, more and more often, she wasn't. Because in the upper echelons of society, the real elite, not the red carpet version, exclusion is never loud. No doors are slammed. No statements are issued. Just silence. Invitations stop coming. Calls stop returning. And soon, you're watching the party from the outside, wondering when exactly things shifted. For Meghan, the shift came gradually. From royal exit drama to podcast controversies, headlines began painting her as someone who couldn't quite settle. Demanding, divisive, always at the center of the storm. In circles that value discretion over disruption, that reputation spreads like perfume, invisible but unmistakable. Serena with her serene image. Emma with her polished acceptance. And Meghan, still speaking, still seen, but no longer invited. This isn't about a single weekend or a few photos on Instagram. It's about a quiet, careful distancing. One that says far more than words ever could. And soon, the consequences of that silence would come crashing down. There was a time, not long ago, when Meghan Markle wasn't just invited to the table. She was setting it. Her marriage to Prince Harry had been a global event. A dazzling fairy tale wrapped in modern meaning. Here was a biracial American woman stepping into one of the most exclusive institutions on earth. She wasn't just marrying a prince. She was rewriting history. The world watched with awe. And at her side, always, were the women who seemed to understand the moment as deeply as she did. Serena Williams was the first among them. Not just a tennis legend, but a confidant. She spoke in interviews about how proud she was of Meghan. She defended her when tabloids turned toxic. And she offered something far rarer than public support, private loyalty. Whether courtside at Wimbledon or quietly messaging behind the scenes, Serena was there, and so were others. Oprah Winfrey, the media queen who lent her platform, her friendship, and eventually that interview. Priyanka Chopra, global star, champion of representation, and another name closely tied to Meghan's inner circle. They weren't just powerful women of color. They were part of a shared vision of what womanhood, royalty, and leadership could look like. Behind closed doors, there were rumors of a group chat, messages flying between Serena, Meghan, Priyanka, Amal Clooney. A sisterhood built not just on celebrity, but on ambition, intellect, and a sense of mission. These weren't women fighting to be accepted. They were redefining the rules. For a brief moment in time, Meghan Markle was untouchable. Not because she followed tradition, but because she broke it with grace, with fire, with a smile. Every appearance, every speech, every look she wore felt like an act of reclamation. She wasn't just a Duchess of Sussex. She was an influencer of culture, a survivor of cruelty, and a queen of empathy. She spoke about mental health, feminism, race, motherhood, and people listened. She connected with a generation that had long stopped believing in fairy tales, until she walked into one. And Serena? She was never far away, always nodding, supporting, showing up. They were sisters in the spotlight, women who had endured public scrutiny, coded criticism, and quiet exclusion, but they had risen above it, together. This was the era when Meghan was still the queen piece on the board, not yet cornered, not yet sacrificed, still holding power, still moving freely, still believed to be untouchable. But in elite circles, especially among those who play a longer, quieter game, power is rarely taken all at once. It is chipped away, one whisper, one missed invitation, one subtle shift at a time. And Meghan never saw the checkmate coming. It didn't happen overnight. There was no dramatic falling out, no shouting match, no public feud, just less texting, less showing up, less effort. At first, Meghan didn't notice. She was still speaking, louder than ever, still fighting for her truth, still holding the world's attention. But slowly, something shifted beneath the surface, something harder to name, something much harder to fix. The stories from insiders started to surface, quietly and always off the record. That group chat, once filled with late-night voice notes and private pep talks, it went silent. Not all at once, but the energy changed. One source close to the circle revealed that Meghan had started to dominate the conversations, that even casual chats about someone's new project, a baby, a dinner party, would somehow circle back to her struggles, her drama, her latest headline. And at first, everyone understood. She was under attack. The scrutiny was unbearable. But after a while, the fatigue set in. Not everyone wanted to live in the storm. There's a fine line between sharing and centering. And Meghan, perhaps without realizing, had crossed it. What had once been mutual support began to feel like emotional labor. Friends weren't confiding anymore. They were comforting. And the circle grew smaller. Another group chat formed. The same faces, minus one. And Meghan wasn't told. She simply stopped receiving replies. Voice notes went unanswered. Invitations unacknowledged. Serena, who once called her family, began responding with polite but empty emojis. And eventually, not at all. This wasn't drama. It was strategy. Serena is a master of the soft exit. No confrontation, no headlines, just quiet, intentional distance. One source close to her business world said it best. If Meghan's coming, kiss discretion goodbye. The risk wasn't worth it anymore. Not with brand deals. Not with global sponsors. Not with reputations built over decades. Then came the late Como trip. Private villas. Secret chefs. A weekend of wine, laughter, and legacy. The guest list? Impeccable. Curated. Protected. Meghan knew about it. Everyone knew. It was the kind of gathering you didn't ask to join. You waited to be summoned. But she reached out. Politely. Carefully. No demands. Just a simple, hopeful message. And the response? Cold. Polished. Final. So lovely to hear from you. This one's a very tight group, but let's catch up soon. Soon never came. Days later, the joke leaked. A careless comment from someone close to the circle, meant to be funny, but it wasn't. You can't party with us. Not a high school insult, not a catty throwaway, but a statement. from women who move silently, but speak volumes with exclusion. For Meghan, the sting wasn't just in being left out. It was in finding out secondhand, through a reporter, a social post, a whisper, and there were no apologies, no clarifications, just silence. Not angry silence, not cruel, just the kind that hurts the most. The kind that says, you are no longer one of us. This wasn't about a single weekend. It was a culmination of something deeper, the soft unraveling of trust and the high cost of always being the story. And now, the doors that once opened for Meghan without question would require more than a title to unlock again. Lake Como isn't just a destination. It's a statement, a place of still water and deep secrets, where the truly elite gather, not to be seen, but to disappear. No red carpets, no paparazzi, just silence, serenity, and a guest list guarded like royalty itself. This trip, the one that shattered the last illusions, was as private as they come, a curated weekend among women who understood discretion, legacy, and above all, belonging. And at the center of it all, Emma Thynn, the Marchioness of Bath, British nobility by marriage, yes, but embraced by the aristocracy in a way Meghan never was. Poised, elegant, silent in her power. No scandals, no press statements, no podcasts, just presence. For many in that circle, Emma was a mirror held up to Meghan, two women of mixed heritage, two women who married into elite institutions, but with vastly different outcomes. As one insider quietly put it, Emma represents what Meghan could have been if she played the long game. That comment stung for more reasons than one. Because Meghan had played a game, but it wasn't the one they wanted. She chose voice over silence, visibility over obedience. She had spoken her truth and been labeled the problem. And now, the contrast was blinding. Emma, regal and unbothered. Meghan, missing from the frame. The calls started softly. A message here. A check in there. When those went unanswered, Meghan reached out through mutual contacts, tried to confirm, or perhaps just to be seen. But no one replied. The trip unfolded in silence. A parade of effortless elegance on private balconies, laughter over candlelit dinners, early morning swims in hidden coves. Not a single mention of Meghan, not even in jest, not even in whispers. She wasn't just excluded, she had become invisible. There's a special kind of cruelty in being forgotten by those you once considered your sisters. Not blocked, not unfollowed, just quietly erased. And for Meghan, whose brand had been built on sisterhood, solidarity, and the power of shared stories, this was more than rejection. It was humiliation, wrapped in calm, wrapped in grace. The kind that leaves no proof, only a dull, lingering ache. After Lake Como, the silence wasn't just social, it was strategic. Meghan's team moved quickly, more empowerment messaging. Another podcast teaser, a quietly placed article about her next chapter. But the tone had changed. What once felt like a movement now felt like spin, carefully worded, painfully calculated. Behind the scenes, her team pushed harder, offering exclusives, pitching partnerships, try to reclaim the narrative. But the calls weren't coming in anymore. Not like before. One Hollywood executive put it bluntly, they don't fire you in this town. They just stop calling. Serena, for her part, stayed silent. No public unfollowing. No shade. Just nothing. When asked about Meghan in private circles, she reportedly demurred, changed the subject, made it clear she's done defending her. The woman who once cheered from the royal chapel now stood behind a velvet rope of silence. And the pattern began to repeat. PR contacts stopped replying. Former allies ghosted. Even luxury brands, once eager to align with Meghan's modern Duchess image, began stepping back, quietly ending contracts, stalling campaigns, rethinking partnerships, not because of scandal, but because of exhaustion. One source close to a fashion house said, "It's not even about whether you believe her or not. It's the drama. Every project becomes about her. It's just not worth it anymore." Meghan's reputation, once built on resilience and grace, had morphed into something less flattering, overexposed, self-victimizing, relentlessly curated. There was no room for mystery, no space for evolution, just noise. And in Hollywood, noise without payoff is dangerous. The very industry that once bent over backwards to welcome her, that saw in her a chance to rewrite royalty, to merge activism with celebrity, now tiptoed around her name. It wasn't hatred. It was fatigue. The kind that builds slowly, until you realize you haven't called her back in weeks and don't really plan to. This was the fallout, not a scandal, not a lawsuit, not a tabloid war, just the sonophones that no longer ring, of events she's no longer mentioned in, of a spotlight that quietly shifted elsewhere. It's a brutal truth in elite circles, whether royal or Hollywood. When the drama outweighs the benefit, the door closes fast. And when it closes quietly, it almost never reopens. Somewhere, Meghan saw the photos. Sunlight dancing off Lake Como. Silhouettes on balconies. Uncaptioned smiles. She wasn't tagged. She wasn't named. But she knew. There was Emma, glowing, unbothered, stepping further into the space Meghan once imagined for herself. Not as a replacement, but as a reminder of what might have been, of what the circle still values. Poise, peace, discretion. And Serena? Still building, still conquering, but now doing it quietly, not pulling Meghan back in, not pushing her away, just moving forward. And Meghan? She remains in the spotlight, still visible, still vocal, but increasingly alone. The rooms are quieter, the applause more polite, the support more cautious. Did she sabotage herself? Not intentionally, not cruelly, but maybe by trying too hard to control the story, she lost the trust of the audience, of her friends, of the very women who once stood beside her. It's a lonely kind of irony. The woman who championed inclusion, who fought to belong, now lives outside the circle, looking in. But the question lingers. Could she come back? Not to the royal family, not to the headlines, but to them, to the sisterhood. Could she let go of control long enough to rebuild trust? To sit at the table without holding the microphone? Or has the silence spoken? Has the door already closed? In the end, there's no press release, no dramatic farewell, just a photo taken in golden light, and one name that's quietly, unmistakably missing.